And some texts extend beyond that into 8 to 10 heavens. Hello. Today I'm going to discuss Ascension. I've been working on this video for quite a while. There were some other videos that were tangentially connected to this. It's going to be a pretty in-depth, complicated video. A little daunting, actually. It's one reason why it took so long. But I'm going to talk about the thrones, the judges, the seals, heavens in many traditions. You could also see them as archonic layers or shells, basically like leveling up or breaking free or climbing a ladder. What is divine ascension? So I think it has many different similarities and differences based on the tradition. But I tried to narrow it down into some possible themes: return to the source, union with God, enlightenment, liberation, deification, sometimes awakening, overcoming. Ascending is usually symbolic rather than physical, but who knows? If anything, if it happens fully, I would say you just transcend the body. But in allegory, this is shown in several different ways. Something like Jacob's ladder, Ezekiel's vision, sometimes sacred mountains or the axis mundi. That's a subject I tackle in my first book. Sufi annihilation of the ego, Nirvana in Buddhism, but this seems more like a binary. Before we get into this, let me say this. I'm going to show several detailed schematics. I will spend a bit of time on each one, but feel free to pause the video if you want to examine them more. There's lots of information here, and just to keep the video rolling, I'm going to have to do that. But I'm going to start with the Gnostics. One of the recurring patterns across these traditions is the idea of ascending through successive levels of reality. Different Gnostic sects do this in different ways, but they all portray the soul moving from the material world to some kind of unknowable source. A useful way to understand these systems is that each level is simultaneously a heaven or ontological realm, a state of consciousness, a degree of gnosis, or level of ignorance. In other words, the cosmos is structured like consciousness itself. You don't simply travel upward. You awaken inward. It's just represented as upward, if that makes sense. Think about the ego, the id, the superego, unconscious, etc. These are all layers of mind. You need progressively higher states of gnosis to unpeel the onion, to see through the ignorance of each shell. And I think it's the same here. Sethian Ascension. The Sethian tradition has the most elaborate model of mystical ascent, I'd say. Salvation is escape from cosmic imprisonment through revelation and direct knowledge. So we start with the physical realm, material realm, which is at the bottom, the physical body. If you were to ascend, you would encounter these layers of the planetary archons. First would be the physical archons. Those are actually in our physical existence, but then you go into the planetary. And all of this in the Kanoma is the physical cosmos. The soul would ascend through each ruler here, and each archon attempts to block you. The goal, at least for the lower part, would be to transcend the demiurge. Then you would progress into the pleroma. That would be like encountering the 4 luminaries and 12 eons. That would be like the first layer, and you'd be moving up successively through each layer until you reach the one parent, or the monad. The monad is beyond intellect, beyond being, absolute transcendence. Then we move into the 13 Seals of Marsanes. This Sethian text in particular describes 13 ascending spiritual levels, or seals, culminating in the silent unknown God. So as you can see, there are 13 seals. They all have different names. And again, you would need passwords. You need to be in the correct state of mind, purified in some way. But if you look at the description on the right, you can see that things just get less physical and more about noetic awareness. But then even past that, it's almost like it gets thinner and thinner until it reaches silence. In Valentinian Ascension, they showed creation more positively than the Sethians. The demiurge is ignorant rather than malicious, so salvation is less about escaping and more about restoring. But humanity exists in three broad categories: the hylic, the psychic, and the pneumatic. In death, the soul's destination depends upon one's nature and the reception of gnosis. So the fullness exists of 30 aeons arranged in paired syzygies. Some examples are the Bythos, Nous, Aletheia. In my last video, I mentioned that the word Lethe is actually in her name, which is interesting. Logos is Zoe. Those are the pairs. Anthropos and Ecclesia. The drama here is Sophia's fall, restoration of Sophia, restoration of cosmic harmony, similar to Sethian. But this happens through the bridal chamber. The soul reunites with its heavenly counterpart, its syzygy. This is restoration. It's like healing, fragmentation, and restoring the soul to divine fullness. For Basilidean Ascension, the material cosmos is basically defined by the archons. It's the lowest realm, just like in the others. But in this one, humanity contains a hidden divine element called a sonship, which is trapped within matter. It comes from the world seed, which is panspermia. There are three sonships within the seed. Ignorance binds souls to the cycle of material existence, like in the others. There are 7 heavens, which are presided by a great archon. In some texts, this is referred to as Yahweh, and I guess it would be demiurge. But everything in the 7 heavens corresponds to the 7 planetary spheres, and the soul must pass through all these to get to the 8th, the Ogdoad. It's stated that there's even an archon here of some kind. I think Basilidean outlook is a bit vague. I appreciate the Sethian one a little bit more because they're quite detailed. Eventually, you would come to the 365 heavens, and these are each ruled by a successive angelic power, and this is like the totality of existence, basically. Abrasax or Abraxas is said to symbolize this system, and that's because the numerical value of its Greek letters equals 365. I have an Abraxas stone video where I go deeply into what Abraxas means, but eventually the sonship awakens or returns. Salvation occurs when the sonship, the divine seed hidden within humanity, is awakened through gnosis, and it separates itself from the lower realms. In some ways, it almost reminds me of a rocket with its boosters. The boosters kind of fall away. Then you would reach the boundary or the limit of creation. This marks the end of all created reality, sort of like the stratosphere or something. And beyond it lies the utterly transcendent God, who is inaccessible to every archon and heavenly power. But somehow you would make it through all that. I think at this point, it's almost like the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. The unbegotten Father is kind of like the wizard behind the curtain. He exists beyond time, space, thought, but the sonship ultimately finds its rest in this source. Jewish mysticism and apocalyptic literature. So the 7 heavens appears in Jewish apocalyptic literature as well. I think the outlook is different though. These are not barriers imprisoning the soul, but successive levels of God's ordered creation. But I do think it translates over a bit. If you look at it, the beginning, the curtain is basically physical existence. Number 2 is the firmament. It's the sun, moon, stars, planets. This is where the archons would be blocking you. Then it goes into these kind of higher choirs and thrones, and the Shekinah, which is also in other Gnostic sects. A few of them use this term. Hekhalot, Merkabah, mysticism. I have a Merkabah video if you want to know more about it. I'm not going to go too much into it here, but the Hekhalot means palaces. The mystic ascends through these palaces. Each palace is guarded by powerful angels. They require sacred names, seals, or passwords. It tests the worthiness of the visionary. In all of these, it's not about reaching heaven per se. It's more about overcoming your bestial nature and being in the throne of God. And if you do it correctly in Merkabah, then it would be like Ezekiel's vision, the divine chariot vision. The 70 heavenly princes. This tradition derives primarily from Deuteronomy, Daniel, and some other interpretations. Every nation has a celestial prince or guardian angel. The number 70 symbolizes the totality of the nations of the world. These angelic rulers administer earthly kingdoms under God's sovereignty. This idea later influenced many Gnostic concepts of the cosmic rulers or archons, sort of like governors. Kabbalah. I'm working on a Kabbalah series right now, and in the series I talk about how I see the Kabbalah spheres and paths as kind of circuits. Like a lot of Gnostic sects, this is a process of emanation. I will put my sources on the screen here, and I go way into it more in the other videos in the series, but basically it starts with Ein Sof, which is the unknowable God. Sim-Sum, this is described in Lurianic Kabbalah. It's like the concealment that allows creation to emerge. There are the 10 Sephirot or Sephiroth. These are the spheres. They are divine emanations, and you can ascend them by going through the paths. I'm not going to go through each one. If you want to know more about it, check out the other videos. Malkuth is the beginning, Kether is the crown, and you go up in this pattern here. This is the tree of life. However, there are several other trees, 4 increasingly material realms. Creation unfolds through several worlds. The ladders can be climbed: Christian, Jewish, Apocalypse, and angels. Many of these different sects and traditions have a fixation on the number 7. In this case, much of what I'm talking about comes from the book of Revelation. 7 seals, divine scroll sealed 7 times. Opening each seal reveals cosmic events. 7 trumpets follow the 7th seal, and they announce successive judgments. 7 bowls, final judgments poured upon the world. Now, if you look at this with an orthodox view, this is like the end of the world. I don't see it this way, actually. I see it as almost an alchemical transformation, like a coded text that shows ascension. 9 orders or choirs of angels. This comes from an anonymous Christian who is known as Pseudo-Dionysus. They organize them into 3 triads, with the highest closest to God and the lowest closest to humanity. The first triad is the seraphim, the cherubim, and the thrones, and that's the highest order. I would say that these are almost like uber angels or levels. The second triad has the dominions or dominations, the virtues and the powers. These are the warriors that oppose demons in this outlook. I would say that this is almost the overseers. They grant miracles and blessings. In the third triad, it's the principalities, archangels, and angels. These are more involved with human life. The 10th would be the beyond, which would be the divine presence of God. Now, these are seen as choirs of angels, but I actually see them similarly as the other traditions in here. That yes, they have their function, but they are also a part of the ladder. They are kind of rungs on the ladder. In stories like Paul's third heaven, 2 Enoch, the ascension of Isaiah, the Revelation tradition, they talk about several heavens. The first heaven, weather, clouds, atmospheric realm, the angelic beings associated with the lower heavens. The second is the prison of rebellious angels, the fallen watchers or imprisoned spirits. And I think this actually aligns with some of the Gnostic outlook as well, because below the realm of Seth, there is a kind of other heaven that houses the kind of purgatorial spirits. The third heaven, paradise, garden of God. Paul was caught up in the third heaven in Corinthians. Heavens 4 through 6, they vary by text, but this is the kind of administration. I would almost see this as the luminaries in Gnosticism. The 7th heaven is the highest heaven, the throne of God. This is kind of where the Revelation throne visions come from. And some texts extend beyond that into 8 to 10 heavens. In 2 Enoch, and other places. And these are increasingly abstract divine mysteries. And beyond is the highest. The planets, mystical realms, and numbers. So in all of these, there are 7 planetary spheres, basically. And Hermeticism and alchemy also address this. You know, it starts off with the elements, earth, fire, air, and water. It goes through the planetary powers. Each sphere represents a different cosmic power or limitation that the soul must transcend. These would be the archons. Then you would go past the sphere of the fixed stars and up and up and up to the Father. Mandaean traditions say these are gates or watchhouses. The guardians are called Matarta, and these are checkpoints where souls undergo judgment and purification after death. It translates as watch houses, toll houses, places of detention. There are ancient Egyptian parallels to this as well. From the Amduat and Book of Gates, Ra, the sun god, passes through 12 regions of the underworld. Each gate represents transformation and renewal. And if you look back on the diagrams that I've shown, typically there are 7 main ones, and then an 8th and a 9th, but then there are a few higher levels, and that would probably correspond to the 12. In the 12 gates of the night, the deceased face 42 divine judges. The soul is tested according to cosmic order. Egypt was traditionally divided into 42 nomes or regions. So the number may symbolize the entire land and the totality of order. There are also Zoroastrian parallels too. The 7 Amisha Spentas are divine beings connected with Arua Mazda. They function similarly to angelic powers in the other traditions. And the other thing to remember is that numbers are tied to all of this. There are common number patterns across all the mystical system. If you look at this chart, 7 stands for completion or the planets or the heavens. 8 is the higher realm beyond the cosmos. 9 is divine completion or the higher heavens. 12 is cosmic order or gates or zodiac. 30 is the Gnostic eons. 42 is judgment and divine law. 70 is nations, angels, cosmic rulers. 365 are the days or total cosmic structure or abraxas. So yeah, that was a lot of information, but I just want to end it here with a few questions. You can see these as literal realms or symbolic maps of consciousness, metaphorical stages of spiritual transformation, but they all seem to express a similar intuition in my mind. So the commonality here is the world that we experience, the entirety of reality. Are the heavens places that we travel to through death, or are they things that we need to transcend through life? I think that is probably the most important question. Is the journey upward or inward, or both? I think it's both, actually. I think it's kind of a paradox. And what is the source that the soul is seeking? I don't know. There's something about all this where I feel like the people before us were trying to show. Either we're missing some kind of piece, or from our modern viewpoint, we can't completely wrap our head around it. I don't really understand it, but I know that at least in the West, every tradition has basic similarities in terms of this. So it makes me think that there's something here. Put your thoughts below on how you think this actually works. That's all I got for today. Take care. Have a good day.